Hi, I want to welcome you to the fifth and final segment of this lecture on the global economic crisis and its implications for Canada. In this fifth segment, what I'm going to be talking about is the choices for Canada. This lecture is based on my new book, Beyond the Bubble, Imagining a New Canadian Economy, published in the fall of 2009 by Between the Lines Publishers in Toronto. All right, we've looked at the crisis. We've looked at the nature of the crash, its wider implications, the fact that the world is moving beyond the age of the American-centered economy, the era of globalization, if you like, and the challenges that poses for Canada. Now, I think the main challenge this poses for Canada right off the top is that the inclination of the leaders of this country at the political level and at the economic level, at the business level, is to try to go back to where we were on the eve of the crash. In other words, to go back and say, we've had this crash, we've had this crisis, now let's not learn anything from it, let's simply go back and put things back in place the way they were. In other words, Humpty Dumpty, if you like, has fallen, and our job is to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Now, I suggest that that's folly. I think it would be as serious an error for us to do that following this crisis, as we move our way out of this crisis, as it would have been for Canadians at the end of World War I to say, hey, Britain's no longer as important as it once was. It used to be our biggest trading partner, source of investment, and we're going to tie ourselves even more closely to Britain in the years ahead. In other words, put Humpty Dumpty back together again. This would be a colossal error on the part of Canada if that were the direction that we were to go. And yet that is where Canadian policymakers see our future. It's clear that the global economy in the 21st century is going to be centered on Asia and much less on the US than was the case in the past. Now, I'm not drawing the conclusion from that we ought to do with Asia what we did back in the 19th century with Europe and in the 20th century with America, and that is to simply regard ourselves as a producer of raw materials, dig stuff out of the ground, ship it to the Asians, and they ship back finished manufactured products to us so that the science, the research, and the development goes on in Asia, and we're the people digging the holes in the ground. I'm not suggesting that at all. In fact, I think what we have to do is to use this crisis as a way to think through where Canada can go. I suggested in the last segment that rebuilding our cities and rebuilding our transportation equipment industries can be a beginning point for this. I think that it's also clear that we have enormous opportunities in other sectors of the economy. One of them, and I'll just mention it in passing, is the whole educational area. We can turn Canada into a country that helps to educate large parts of the world. During the last number of years, as a result of the rising concern with national security in the US, hundreds of thousands of students from around the world who used to think the US was the natural place for them to go are looking for other places to go. I put it out there that creating an education-based economy, a green economy, a culture-based economy, an economy that rebuilds cities, that rebuilds transportation equipment industries, these are possibilities. But we have to go back to the idea that we should think through our economic strategy. I suggest that we're on the wrong course and that we're setting out to do the wrong kinds of things. One thing we've got to get right is what the real source of wealth is in this country. In recent years, in the era of what we can call the neoliberal economic order, the theory very much was that wealth is created, capital is created in those bank towers by sort of genius entrepreneurs. That's where wealth comes from. That's where capital comes from. That's wrong. That stands reality on its head. The truth is that wealth is created by people who work. It's labor that creates wealth. That has been true in the past, and it's true now. And if we want to get things right in the 21st century, we're going to have to understand that. That's the fundamental choice we're going to have to make. In other words, it's the people who do the work. It's the creativity of labor that actually creates and moves us forward. It creates a future, moves us forward into that future. That means, in my view, that instead of putting Humpty Dumpty back together again and creating a world centered on big finance, the big finance that has had to be bailed out in the great financial bailouts of the past year, that what we have to do is to create a Canada and more broadly a world order in which people in their own nations and in their own regions, their cities, their cooperatives, in their workplaces, control the capital that they create through their labor. That's going to have to be, in my opinion, the kind of direction that we've got to go in. And we have to go back to the idea in this country that free enterprise can't do the job on its own. There's got to be economic planning, economic thinking, and economic strategy. We used to talk about that. In the last couple of decades, we stopped talking about it. I think we have a fundamental choice. We can end up, if you like the Argentina of the 21st century, a country that was thought in the 20th century to have enormous prospects in terms of capital and its resources, and of course went into crisis after crisis. Or we could end up, if I could put another name on the list, a country like Sweden, which very often in the 20th century was able to see where things were going to go in terms of the development of new technology and to put their workers and their industries in the right place at the right time so that a high standard of living could be created on a pretty equal basis for the people of Sweden. We've got to think about these things because this crisis is a crisis that's going to be going on for a long time. And at present, there's not enough basic and fundamental thinking about what it means for Canadians.